We are back after a month of missing the Something in the Air podcast. Our first time in 5 years that we have not had a monthly weather update. And this month we almost weren't going to have it. Dave Robinson is away in Italy. He's following in my footsteps. And we were looking for someone to do it. But there was one person I knew that could fill his shoes admirably. And he did just that. Jim Eberwine. We'll talk all about him when we get into the interview here, but just a wealth of South Jersey knowledge. He lives in Absecon. So it was really great to have him on. I talk to him all the time, good friend of mine. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to Jim as we talk about everything that happened in June on Something in the Air podcast. This time, we're doing something a little different. Usually next to me, my one weather dad, New Jersey State Climatologist Dr. Dave Robinson. He is on a European excursion, so I swap out one parent for another. And we have Jim Eberwine here to talk all about the month of June here. Jim is a very special person to me. Has taught me a lot over the years since I've been here. He's been on this podcast before a couple of years ago. But Jim, you want to just roll off all the titles you have, because I think I'm going to forget like 5 of them if I try to keep up.
Well, first off, Joe, I'm retired. That's one.
Right. Yes. Number one, he's retired. Don't be mistaken.
But I teach aviation weather at Atlantic Cape Community College, also Egg Harbor Township High School. I teach a combination of aviation weather and marine weather at Cape May Tech. I'm the emergency management coordinator for my hometown of Absecon. I teach courses for the New Jersey State Police and also for FEMA.
Yep. And retired National Weather Service meteorologist as well in Mount Holly and Philadelphia and Atlantic City. He's bounced around, a few different places around the area. We actually did a story on him last year for the Weather Service's anniversary. And Jim would never say it in this podcast, but I will say it. He's also the Grand Marshal for the Smithville 4th of July parade, which is coming up, of course, on the 4th of July. So Jim has been practicing his smiling and his hand waving all week long. There it is. Yeah, he's got it. Yeah. Jim, well, thanks for hopping on. Really appreciate it. Last month we actually didn't have this podcast for the first time in 5 years. So I appreciate you hopping on and making it possible for us as we go into the month of June. So
you are quite welcome, Joe.
We're going to get started here. We'll go off the top with the biggest environmental story, I'll say, because it's not really kind of weather, but definitely something we're all talking about. And that is this darn smoke. It started about the middle of May, Jim. It's July 3rd. We just had a weekend of some smoke across the area. About 1 million acres burned in northern Quebec and Ontario here. The worst of it, and we didn't get orange in South Jersey, but it was orange in some places. But the first Wednesday in June, where New York City had the worst air quality in the world by a lot that day. So, Jim, first let me ask you, in your experience working at the Weather Service, have we seen this bad of air quality for this long? Like, can you put this in context for us?
No, Joe, I haven't seen it this long. And I entered the Weather Service in 1972 in Philadelphia. And we actually had an air pollution segment in our office there. And they monitored the air quality even back then. But no, this is by far the worst of an extended period. We've had a couple of things happen for over a 2 or 3 day period where there was real toxicity in the air from fires nearby and stuff like that, where people complained about the smell and stuff. But for a long period like this, that has caused visibilities to go down to maybe a quarter mile during the day, like you saw in New York. Yeah. No, this is perhaps the longest stretch of poor air quality, also poor atmospheric conditions.
And this came in 2 waves, because we had the May part of this and then the June and early July part. And the May part was, I would say, more of a typical kind of smoke we see here, Jim. It's high in the sky. It's not coming down to the surface, because that smoke was from Alberta wildfires. And we've seen a lot of Western wildfires, whether it's Canada or the U.S. coming this way. But it got different as we went into early June, because we had wildfire smoke coming from Nova Scotia. We had wildfire smoke coming from Quebec and Ontario, like we said.
Right.
And when you're that close, being to that area, it has a greater potential to be closer to the surface, right?
Right. Oh yeah, and usually, Joe, we usually from Alberta, we usually get our clippers.
Yeah,
But I
that's
don't know
right.
what I don't know what you I know what are you going to call this when the smoke comes from Alberta and the boreal forest up there?
Right.
And then you're right. We had the heavy concentration right around the nose of Hudson's Bay coming down from Quebec, and then Nova Scotia, we had the fires. And just when we thought the air quality would get good, we had a few fires here in the Pine Barrens.
Yeah, we
So
did.
yeah, we've had a long stretch.
Yeah, and people have been saying, and I've been saying it too, like it doesn't even feel like summer in a way because we've had some days with cloudiness and some showers and cooler weather, and we'll talk about that. But then, when it's been sunny out or mostly sunny, it's just been gray from the smoke.
Right.
So it's like we're
Yep.
not. It's been very hard to get a day that's been both warm and actually like a bright blue sky.
Well, you're right. People have been saying, first off, where did June go?
Right. Yeah.
Where the heck did June go? And then and you'll be talking about it later. The temperatures ending May and early part of June. Uh, but if you looked at the atmospheric soundings, you can actually isolate that layer where the dry air was from those fires.
Yeah.
And looking at the long-term models today, we've got this uh, deep low that's going to be swinging by around the 11th through the 15th or 16th, right over top of us. And where do you think the trajectory is going to come from? The Quebec
Canada.
fires. So we
Yep.
may be back into it again.
Yeah, it's a summer smoke for sure. And one thing too, I just want to say this because I've gotten a couple of questions, even from my own parents. How come they can't put out these wildfires? Well, they're trying, right? So number one, we're trying, but it's in a very remote place. You think about the
Yep.
Pine Barrens being remote. Try somewhere
Yep.
where there's no roads or towns anywhere around it. You got to
Yep.
bring all the people, house them, feed them, water. You got to find water sources. It's a very tough thing to do. And really, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the only way we're going to really get rid of this is if Mother Nature comes and pretty much rains it out.
Mother Nature has a way of turning things around, but you're right about the fires. When you look at the population of Canada, and that's a great big country, the population is only about 35 million. And most of those people live within 100 miles of the US border. So a lot of those fires are out of reach and out in the areas where there doesn't seem to be that urgency to put them out like our urgency is on the West Coast.
Right. Exactly. So it's a difficult situation here, and it's something that hopefully can't. They're going to get enough rain where it gets knocked out. But this really could be a summer of smoke here. We just have to take this really day by day and see what's
Oh,
happening
I know. I
up
know.
there. It's not, and wind direction is going to play a role, of course, in everything. But until that smoke really goes out, we're still always going to have risk for it here. So
Oh,
let's.
yeah. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Jim. Go ahead. Finish what
Yeah,
you're
that's
saying.
all right. No, it's going to be a while before they burn out. And their peak season, I think, is July. I think
Yeah,
that's
that
their
makes
peak
sense.
season in Canada, something like that.
I can see that, especially being far north, and it's they have that combination of higher temperatures and the humidities, on the lower side here. What that smoke's done, and you alluded to it, Jim, and it has kept us cooler. In addition to the smoke, that those low pressures that have been rolling through here, and it's another month where we're below average. So we
Yeah.
went 2 months in a row below average, which doesn't happen that often. But we've been having it here. I have at the Atlantic City International Airport 3.6 degrees below average, and at the marina, Atlantic City Marina, 1.9 degrees below average. And Jim, I think you threw out a stat maybe last week. When was the last time we went 2 months in a row below average? I think you had something about that.
Well, at least for 16, 17 years. I mean,
Right.
for May and June, I'm
For
speaking
May and
about.
June. Okay. So
Yeah,
May
for
and
May, and
June
then
alone.
then I saw your stats, which were very impressive, the ones you
Yeah.
came up with.
Yeah. And Jim's referring to, we went 20 days in a row below average. I mean, the last time we actually did that wasn't all that long ago. It was in March of 2018. And Jim, I remember because it was my first winter at the Press of AC, and we had 4 nor'easters in a row that month. We called it the 4 Easter month.
Well, we were
We were
welcoming you,
snowing in
Joe.
late March. What's that, Jim?
We were welcoming you to South Jersey.
You are, and really went off with a bang because, if you remember that 17-18 winter, we had a good amount of snow in early December. And then from like Christmas time through January was also below average, but extreme,
Yeah.
like very below average. We were like below zero at the marina, even on New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, I believe. I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
walking, I was out for not 4th of July, but New Year's Eve with a couple friends, and it was like face biting cold. Like you didn't see that. But anyway, the last time we were that much below average in May and June was 1981. So,
right.
for that late spring, early summer to be below average, we haven't, been that below average that long. But, so it really was the persistency of this that was impressive, and it carried over into June. But we also had some days that were like fairly below average. I'm looking right here, Jim. We had on June 4th a high of 69 degrees and a low of 46. On June 4th. On the 8th, we were in the 40s again with a high of 72. And then we only had a high of 64 on June 22nd. I remember that day because it was just gross out. It was northeast wind, cloudy, misty. So we really, on the nighttime side, I think people have probably enjoyed the cooler nights that we've had.
Yeah.
But, it's been what I like to say, a lot of nice weather days, minus the smoke, but nice weather days, but not beach weather days. We haven't really had that long summery stretch yet, although it looks like we're going to get it this week.
I would guess, Joe, given those temperatures that you just quoted, I would guess that somebody in the research community, one of the universities, or maybe even in NOAA, is going to go back and examine this smoke in terms of what it did to our temperatures,
Yeah.
and they're going to come up with some sort of relationship between the smoke and also the dry air and the cooler temperatures.
I agree 100%. And I'll just speak from experience because when the smoke first came in mid-May, I'll put my hand up. I was too high on some of these temperature forecasts during the
Yeah,
day
yeah,
because,
yeah, yeah.
it looked, hey, maybe it's a 78, 79 degree day and ended up being 75, 76. And the only thing that changed was the smoke coming in. So definitely an impact. And we've seen this before, right? Super volcanoes explode and,
Yeah, yeah.
and you cool down for a year or two. We've seen that before. So it would just make sense to me that that's what we're going to, that's
Well,
probably the cause for
I,
some of that.
I remember we touch upon a little bit about Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines
Yeah.
in 1991 when that erupted. The Earth cooled down 1.8 degrees for the year that you're talking about. And you look at the smoke that we've had in the Western U.S. and now look at Canada. You wonder what that's going to do in terms of temperatures over the next year as far as the planet's concerned.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We're going to pay attention to this because and I don't know what the Eastern Canada temperatures are, but I have to imagine it's something similar as well.
Yeah,
And the thing that makes this unique, going back to the smoke, is it's over such a highly populated area.
yeah,
Sometimes this isn't
yeah,
going over highly populated areas either.
yeah.
But going back to these temps, Jim, I see even in Atlantic City, at the marina, our highest for the month was 82, and we're here on July 3rd. And this might change by the time you listen, but we haven't had a 90-degree day at the airport, at
No,
Atlantic City International Airport. And I
we
did a
missed it.
little,
Yeah,
first of all, I was like, really? I said, because it got really warm in April for one
yeah,
stretch. It
yeah,
was, but
yeah.
I guess it was just shy of 90. So it turns out that this is the fifth longest we've had to wait for our 90-degree day at the airport here. But we have, I can pull it up probably real quick while we're talking, but, really the latest is late July at some point.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if we're gonna get that number one spot, but we're flirting with 90 this week. We might even get it today when we're recording.
We hit
Um,
89 yesterday.
yeah, 89
Yeah.
yesterday. So we're getting just there, but we haven't really had that persistent heat and humidity until just very recently here across the area.
You want to hear something interesting
Yeah.
in 16, 17 years, the temperature at Atlantic City has averaged higher than the city of Philadelphia.
You told me
When
that on
you
the
go
side. Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
go
I
month
remember
by
you called
month,
me and told me about this.
and you say to yourself, what happened to the heat island in Philadelphia? But
Yeah.
I think the heat island is still there, but because the heat it comes from the city itself downtown and then is pushed into the northeast suburbs, I think that's where your heat island is, in the northeastern suburbs, and you're getting some relief in the city. But that's amazing. We average in 15, 16 years about 2 degrees above normal. In Philly, 1.6. We're actually the new heat island down here in Atlantic City.
We're cooking in South Jersey. That's just the way it is. Always something
Oh
going
yeah,
on, Jim.
and I know you always mention that about when they're going to put up the excessive heat for South Jersey. I
I
know that's
know.
been
Yeah, well, those excessive heat warnings and watches and advisories were always Atlantic Cape Cumberland's a couple of degrees higher
Under it.
than
Yeah.
Philadelphia
Oh, yeah.
for it. You need to be 105 for the advisory, right? 110 for the warning, a heat
Yeah.
index of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And that's different than the rest of the state. And that's a whole nother story. But sometimes the messaging looks weird if you have all of New Jersey in this heat warning, but you don't have
Yeah.
Atlantic Cape and Cumberland.
Yep.
Anyway, Jim, we're going to take a brief break on this. We're going to come back on the other side. We're going to talk about precipitation, the return of drought, and hurricane season. You're listening to the Something in the Air podcast. The press of Atlantic City is such a unique place for weather, and it's not just because I'm working here. Let me tell you why. We're the only place in the state with a degreed meteorologist, and that means we're writing weather stories, climate stories, environmental stories you're not going to get anywhere else in New Jersey. Plus, with a meteorologist like me, you're able to get forecast videos twice a day from our state-of-the-art IBM Max graphic system, a weather column each day, of course, these podcasts, and plenty of social media postings I'm sure many of you had seen. So if you're interested in more weather, we have our free daily weather newsletter for you at pressabac.com/newsletters. It comes out every morning in your inbox around 7 a.m. And if you want it all, you can subscribe to the Press of Atlantic City at pressabac.com/subscribe. Welcome back, everyone, to the Something in the Air podcast. Hey, by the way, you can subscribe on all your favorite podcast platforms. We have it out everywhere. We have new episodes at the top of the month talking about the weather that was. You can also check out the Across the Sky podcast. That's been actually on a tear lately. That's our national weather podcast I do with our Lee Weather team. Lee Enterprises operates the Press of Atlantic City. We just had an episode about the hot dog eating contest and the weather, Jim. You watch the hot dog eating contest? Are you a fan?
Oh, I watched that over the years, and it reminded me of when they had the wings, the Wing Bowl up in
Wing Bowl.
Philadelphia. I don't remember that. I'm thinking, there's no way I could eat. You got to be kidding me. I mean,
I'm impressed by two things. One, Joey Chestnut just obliterating the field almost every year. He's won 15, I think, of the past 16. The other thing is too, no one ever gets like sick. You don't see a lot of reversal of fortunes, rarely if ever, and no one chokes on the hot dogs either.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, reversal of fortune. Well, this is a kid's show, Jim. I gotta keep it. And then no one gets like, chokes on the hot dogs. Like these are professionals, Jim. They're professional eaters.
Yeah.
Anyway. So I wanted to talk about on the other side, precipitation or the lack thereof. We are back in drought in parts of South Jersey. The United States Drought Monitor put like the the southwestern half of Atlantic County, a smidge of Cape May County, that's like Upper Township, and then we'll say most of Cumberland and parts of Salem and Gloucester in drought. So it's called D1. There's 4 steps of drought. This is the lowest stage, the weakest stage of drought. We call it moderate drought here. Jim, we were talking about this last year. We were in drought for a lot of 2022. We got out of drought, depending on where you were, between September all the way until early November with this. And now it's back here. And, the way I feel about this, Jim, is we're in July. We're in August. You get these showers and storms, but they're not everywhere. You don't really get these widespread rains. And the sun's strong. It's picking up a lot of moisture out of the ground too.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, it's been a very good harvest for everybody north of Trenton over the last 30 days. Down here, though, we haven't had that much. But then if you get into that period beyond 30 days, as you approach 60, you'll find that statewide, everybody's below normal.
Yeah.
But we had a couple of weeks where everything was dumping up north, if you recall.
Yeah.
And one of the strange things, Joe, is I can't remember the last time poor old Ocean and Monmouth counties have had less precip than the rest of the state. I mean, they usually get blasted this time of year with thunderstorms. But and the thing about a drought, you really don't know it until you're in it. You go on and on, you see precipitation falling, and you assume that we're not in a drought condition. Then all of a sudden, like you say, you go to the drought monitor, and there we are standing out in that D1 category that we're in. But yeah, they come and go. And if you look at the Pine Barrens, that's soil. I mean, I can remember we'd have 2, 3 inches of rain one day, Joe. And then in the fire season, it was gone. And we had fires the next day or the day after that. So it really sucks up that moisture when it falls in South Jersey because of the climate. I mean, because of the terrain.
I agree. And the one thing I keep coming back to is if we didn't get all that rain on April 30th to May 1st, we would be
Yep.
in a we would be in a pretty bad situation. That weekend we got, anywhere from 3 to 7 inches of rain, really depended on where you were, but a lot of rain. And that actually we were teetering on drought by that point, and that pulled us
Mhm.
out. But now we
Right.
slipped back in. So, it was really critical that we had that rain at that turn of the month because we could probably be in, maybe D2 in parts
Yeah.
of South Jersey without that. Rainfall totals, it's June. We talk about this all the time. They're hit or miss showers and storms. Generally, though, we were between an inch to, or I should say a half inch to about an inch and a half below average over the
Right.
month of June. It just really depended on where you were. Some places were even above average. Egg Harbor City, Mullica, you had one thunderstorm. I remember the day before Father's Day, that Saturday, where it dumped 6 or 7 inches. Generally, though, below average. Not a good, not a good scenario when you get these isolated storms when you need rain everywhere here. So we'll keep watching drought. Like we said, July and August, usually your lawns are starting to turn brown on a good year, let
Yeah.
alone a year, where you're in drought part of the area.
Well, this is when we start looking toward the tropics, and
Yep.
hopefully we get something come into the Gulf and then up the coast. But
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's it. I mean, I was out today. It is absolutely humid out there.
Yeah.
I
It
mean, it
feels like
is.
it wants to rain, and it will in a few
Yeah,
spots, all
yeah,
4th
yeah.
of July week long, but it's not, it's not those nor'easters or those tropical,
No,
like you said, those tropical systems that can dump 1, 2, 3 inches of rain everywhere. It's just not our, this just isn't our time.
and the water temperatures in the Back Bay along the coast are getting into the mid 70s, upper
Yeah.
70s,
Yeah.
and that's just going to add to the discomfort index that we have.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very interesting, and it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out with our change in air mass from May, June, and then as we get into July. And looking at the long term, as long as we keep the high heat down to the south, we're going to be in these periodic shower after
Right. Right.
severe thunderstorm watch, stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we don't want that high heat, for a lot of reasons, but one of which is it's usually dry when you get that.
Yep,
So
yep,
you have the high
yep.
heat and the dry that's even worse. So, you know, the more temperate we are, the better. It's still summer. We're still going to go to the beach, still going to hang out on the boat. Jim's still going to be waving to everybody at the 4th of July parade. But, you know, it's the more seasonable, the better here. Well, let's go into the tropics as we did talk. You did mention that before here. We kind of got off to a fast start, Jim. Not even before June, but I'm just looking right here. We've had 3 named storms.
Right.
You pointed out in a recent email that we were about 3 named storms around the turn. I think we were at 3 named storms when we started July last year, as well. And then we were super quiet last year until I believe, what was it, Jim? Was it September
September
1st?
1st.
September
September
1st.
1st.
Um, I had a stat that I saw from Phil Klotzbach. He does the hurricanes forecast from Colorado State University. Have you met Phil, Jim? Really smart guy.
I think I did when he came to a conference with Bill Gray. I was out there, and I've been out to Colorado a couple of times, and he was in. There was some conferences about tropical systems.
So Bill Gray is like the father of hurricane forecasting. Could we call
Well,
him that?
He was my father for
He
hurricane.
was
My
so he's my
yeah
grandfather then, my
yeah
weather
yeah.
grandfather.
He's your grandfather.
There we go. Hey, well, I'm in good company. But
He was my tropical textbook.
there's tropical textbook. Yeah. Well, fantastic guy, and he's not with us anymore, but his research lives on forever. But
Yeah.
anyway, Phil Klotzbach said, with the the most recent 2 storms we had, it was the only time in hurricane season history. So going back to about the satellite era, we'll say 1950, where we had 2 storms develop in the month of June in what we call the main development region, which is basically the area from the Lesser Antilles, the Virgin Islands, those islands, all the way east to the coast of Africa and the tropics. We never had to form there during the month of June. Typically in June, our tropical systems are forming in the Gulf of Mexico or in the Bahamas area off the coast of Florida. These, what we like to call long track storms, are kind of rare. Now, those two storms both really did not impact the United States. They fizzled out eventually. But just something unique, this hurricane season. Doesn't really mean anything, I don't think, but
Well,
just something unique.
Statistics and climatology, Joe, is a very powerful tool. Very powerful tool. And it's
Yeah,
nice that we have. Well, I mean, if you were forecasting in 1960, you would have nothing to go back on to look at,
right. Yeah.
30 in the tropics. But now here we are in 2023, you get into meteorology. And like you do a tremendous amount of look back at all these different scenarios. We can look back to, like you said, the satellite era and say, we're seeing a trend here. That's what do they call it? The analogs. I guess they call
Analogs.
that
Yeah.
the
Analog years, looking back at previous years to make a forecast for this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going forward in time, Jim, what have you been telling people about hurricane season as we go into July and August and September?
Well, I'll tell you, if you get on the National Hurricane Center page, right at the top, I think it's still on there. They put out a real in-depth discussion about what they're really looking at. And you mentioned the long track storms coming. I think NOAA and the Hurricane Center is now looking for that real pesky proximity storm, which forms real close to the coast.
Yeah.
And cuts down your preparedness time. And they have this great, I don't know if you've seen it, they got this great write-up on there about how these storms form close to the coast. And even though we're in an El Nino year, which is pretty much an inhibitor of tropical cyclone development, you can still have these ones just kind of sneaking under the radar and getting close to the coast and then intensifying. And that was a very interesting point they made. So, and the Hurricane Center, if you get on there and you look at all the data available, it's overwhelming.
Yeah, you can get lost there. I've got lost there too. I'm looking at like what storms formed in June in 1962. Yeah, you start looking at the track. But hurricanes.gov is that website, for you to check out if you want. And there's a wealth of information there. And one of the biggest changes this year, with the Hurricane Center was now they're looking out 7 days for any potential tropical cyclones. It used to be 5. Now we're going out to 7 to give people more lead time, and more lead times, always a good thing. It's always good to keep your eyes on.
Look at that cone of uncertainty. It used to be a 3-day event. That cone would go out 3 days, but
Yeah.
I guess 15, 20 years ago, I was in a meeting with the Hurricane Center, and the Navy wanted to extend it out to 5 days because when they had a ship come in, all their crew would leave and go on vacation. And to get the ship out at sea, if something happened, they'd have to call them all back. So they wanted 5 days notice.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually didn't know that. I thought it was just because we were so good at forecasting these things by that point.
Nah, well, yeah.
No, because, I say too, and we'll wrap up in a sec, but the stats are a 1-day hurricane forecast in 2000 is as accurate as a 3-day hurricane forecast is now. Yeah. And that's tremendous. And these cones are fairly small. Even you look at Sandy, and because I remember Sandy pretty well. It's the first major hurricane or weather event that I was, kind of coming out of college for. So I was, getting into it really. And the forecast cone from then, just 2012 to now, you even notice that difference as well, how much it's shrunk. So, that is good news. At some point, though, we're going to become too good at it, and we need to figure out a different way to explain the cone, because it only shows where the forecast center is, not where the impacts are. That's going to be a podcast for another day, Joe.
Okay, two things, Joe, real quick. When I came in the Weather Service, the lead time for a tornado warning was -8 minutes, which meant it was on the ground before you even put out the warning. Yeah. And then I want to close with they had a tribute for these hot shots. Those we were talking about forest fires early. They had a tribute for those 19 firemen that died out in Yarnell. Remember, they were caught. They had a tribute, I think, the other day, the 10th year anniversary, and those were the Navy SEALs of the Forestry Department.
Oh, okay, all right. Can you? I'm guessing on YouTube you may be able to watch a ceremony for them.
Yeah, I think they had the ceremony. Yeah, and it's. I mean, they were so close to getting back to safety. But then they had they were cut off. I think it was lightning in a thunderstorm or something.
Yeah. Listen, firefighters, anybody who's battling these fires, they are putting their lives on the line. I know it sounds, cliche. We say it all the time, but they really are, especially in these very remote places too, where they're dealing with, really the unknown. They're not coming home at night. They're staying out for days or weeks on end. So anyway, Jim, this was great. First time doing the weather recap. We'll have to have you on more often. Maybe we'll get you, Dave, and I all together, and we'll chat. We might need like a 3-hour special for that one.
3 hours. But the time goes by fast. The time goes by really fast.
Time does go by fast. That is definitely for sure.
And I thank you. I thank you very much, Joe.
No, thanks, Jim. Pleasure being on, and we'll talk with you soon. Take it easy.